I really do not believe in collectives anymore. It just seems like a lot of work and a loss of money in a community that you don't even necessarily get a say in who's in it, you know?
The people who benefit from being a collective are people who operate with privilege. They're people who look like me, you know? They're like white people, you know?
Yeah.
Any other person, when they identify as a collective, that's like seen as violent. That's like seen as like aggravated or something.
He just said, go where you're wanted, go where you're loved, you know? And yeah, and that resonated so much.
They're like actually helping people. It's not like they're not just like sitting around reading books all the time, which I feel like
and lecturing people about what they read.
So frustratingly is like what you're like exposed to in grad school for so long. It's just like people throwing books at you.
The art scene is so enamored with their own education, and it makes sense because they're indebted for it, right? So you want to make it a bigger deal than it is.
I was like extremely emotional about art and like really believed in art. Like I would cry and critique because I thought some of my like people's work was so beautiful and impactful. I feel like I like lost that.
Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Mika Casten. You're one of the people that took the bridge from CSUN, which is Northridge, right?
Right, yeah.
To what's it called? To UC San Diego.
Yeah, I did. With a lot of help from Victor, of course. Very encouraging.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We're roommates. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Who's your dad's daughter? Because I follow that person, but I don't.
Oh, that's our other roommate. That's my best friend Jocelyn.
Okay.
Yeah, we all hang out. We go
Cool,
way
cool.
back.
You end up in a lot of those posts. So.
Yeah, it's basically my fan page.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know if it was like a concept account or anything, but
No.
it just seems like you guys are homies. Well, cool. Like so what is like your main area of art making, right? Because I had Victor, your roommate Victor was on, and they do a lot of like VR stuff, really interesting, like quirky, like almost what used to be called AV, audio visual department. Is that still a thing or in high schools?
So it's funny. I feel like, well, Victor's a weirdo, and I think if he had it his way, he'd still call it AV maybe.
Yeah.
But he like
now it's all techie, and all the tech nerds got their
yeah.
hands on it, and it's not like
No.
nerds in one room in a high school.
Oh, right, yeah.
They run the world now.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to be
Valley.
like them with my setup. I literally have a light maker.
We have to
get the world, man, capitalism is online for sure. So then what were you studying over there?
I did weird things. I feel like I used to be like a bad boy sculptor, I think, like loved Mike Kelly. I still love Mike Kelly. I'm not diminishing. But then I don't know. It's so funny. I feel like grad school really traumatized me and made me like dislike art. I quit art for 8 months after my first year. I was like, I'm done. I'm just gonna like do it. And then, I was like sad and like was like, how do I selfishly make myself happy? And so I started hosting a cabaret like in the studios and invited people from other departments to like come like read poems. It was just like a multi-use space where people like showed videos, did performance, poetry readings, plays. I did like a monologue of like Eisenhower's like doomsday speech or some shit, and like made the whole audience like yell faggot at me, which was really fun. And that kind of set in motion a practice I didn't think I would have, which
is hold on real quick. Was there anyone in the audience that seemed to enjoy calling you that word a little too much?
Victor. Definitely. No.
Sorry, I derailed you, but I just had to ask.
No, honestly, everybody was like, if anything, like a little more reserved than I anticipated. It made me like, it was like the first one was a little awkward, and I was like, I'm demanding.
I'm picturing like just like a like a little murmur.
Like I'll save the option to like yell a slur adjacent to you at me. So like people could say what they feel comfortable that they've like received. It was like a stupid
Okay,
like
no, no, that's fine.
slip on a banana peel together before we get the cabaret started kind of like
Oh, it was like a loosening event exercise.
yeah, that
Cool.
spark the chaos and like feel safe to be vulnerable. But yeah, I did that and then that kind of spiraled into like me. I was like making sculptural installation and stuff, some archival work, and then that just turned into like I wanted to do more facilitation work, more collaborative work. And between that project and my thesis, it was just that where I was just doing also tangentially, I love the word just and I'm very pro just. Like feels good to say.
It's a simplifier in terms of adjectives, right? It's like there's nothing else.
And so yeah, between that and my thesis, it was like co-working space. I made a sculptural installation and invited collaborators to come work in the space and do their own sort of performance work. And that's where I'm at now. I don't have access to big spaces to do those things, so I'm kind of just floating. But yeah,
That happens after school. You have all these facilities, and then you're like, what,
yeah, I'm
man?
trying to teach myself to like realize that I have the capacity to create from abundance still.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I have a lot, but I'm also still just like reeling from like whatever grad school was and being like, I don't really want to make art right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an unnormal thing. I think it might also just first of all, it's probably related to the amount of time that you spent on making art for like 2 years. It's that's just gonna burn you out. I think
Definitely.
even like most of the artists that I know, like some people have a good routine where they're just painting all the time, but there's a lot of people that are cyclical in their practice, you know,
Right.
especially if part of it is like throwing parties essentially, like
Yeah.
that can get, you know, it's a very social practice. So I can totally understand. I mean, I can't, I love, look, I just interviewed this guy, Mario. I don't know if you know him, Mario Vasquez, who does Mario's Art World.
No,
Yeah,
of yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he's a legend. Like it's it's something's wrong with you if you don't know him. No, I'm kidding. but but that is really impressive what he does because he does not get burnt out. And like that's one person I know that doesn't get burnt out by going to like the social aspect of art.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
Like
is
I
like,
have the go ahead.
yeah. No, I just like that's something really complicated recently too, because not to make this about me not drinking anymore, but like I started a lot of this work in like violent using alcoholism. I'm like relearning how to like socialize again. And it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
and I love what I do and I'm so grateful, but it's like harder now. Like now I feel myself not knowing how to talk to people and like socializing being like the first step in a social practice is like
Yeah, 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 yeah. No,
how
no. But I mean, that's like, I mean, that's a really healthy thing to take on. So I definitely have noticed that you look slimmer, and it's like, man, dude, I need to start fucking not drinking. So like, hey, I've noticed, like, I've seen you in mesh shirts, and I'm like, holy shit, Mika
it's
didn't look like that when I met you.
crazy. It changes your body like also sometimes kind of bad though, because now I realize more when my body hurts, which like
Yeah, yeah,
sucks.
yeah.
But it's also I guess that's like good. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, not to make it about our vices, but I have been detoxing off of marijuana because like I just something bad happened this year. We don't have to get into it, but like I've just been, you know, it accelerated my need for like not wanting to be necessarily present or more than anything, just like having no reason not to, you
Right.
know. And then now I'm like dreaming again, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, that is crazy. When you start dreaming again, I had a dream like where I was holding a baby in a room where everybody was yelling at me. And I'm like, oh shit. There's like this whole subtext going on every night, and I'm like completely missing it, you know?
That's insane.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like, I mean, we don't have to analyze that dream. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's like almost two on the nose.
Thinking about it, I was like, fuck. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and I don't have kids, so that is also a weird element of me. Like, I don't have much experience holding babies,
Yeah.
so so cool. Well, where did you grow up? Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Santa Clarita and then um yeah, then commuted to the valley every day where I met all the greats.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So Santa Clarita is like how far from like wait, so you were in Northridge, so how far is that from Northridge?
In my mind it's like 10 minutes, but I think like actually driving it's probably like 30 because it's like freeways
Okay.
and then road is like the only places that connect it like Santa Clarita to the valley. I was like in Newhall, which was like right on the edge, and then it's like the 5 freeway
Okay.
to the valley and then or the old road, which is what I took because it was
Is that like the only thing I know about Santa Clarita, that's not like a San Bernardino kind of place. That's closer to that's more Santa Barbara adjacent in like in style, or is it because I only know that show that with Drew Barrymore, Santa Clarita Diet.
yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, it's just nice suburbs, but I don't know. Like what is it?
No, totally. It's like I think that show is like the that's like she's like bougie in that show. It's like a cop
Yeah.
town, like cops and like retirees. I feel like CalArts is there and Six Flags is there. It's like
CalArts is in Santa Clarita?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I like
Oh, I thought it was like Van Nuys or some shit. No, never mind. No, Valencia is what I thought it was. Is that
that's part of Santa Clarita.
okay? Okay.
That's like on the complete opposite side of where I was.
So then that like I also heard that there's like retired porn stars up there.
Oh yeah, totally. Oh my God. I talk about this all the time.
Go ahead.
A Valley group study at UCSD, and we have a friend Hazel who's really rad, and she's obsessed with like old like trans porn, especially like in the Valley, because the Valley was the hub, and now she's like not chasing, she's like trying to find this like really amazing, famous like trans porn star that she like found in this like archive. But yeah, a lot of porn retirees, which is like a trip, because
Yeah,
they
yeah.
same as like the cops' wives, like they like they all have the same surgeons probably. It's lit.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Like women very much um like breast implants far into their careers.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
Also, I when I was still at CSUN, I worked at this like strip club sex shop thing called Exposed. There's signs all over LA for it. But the dude was a porn star and he's a total piece of shit. Everyone can go on Vice and like look up worst rated strip club. There's a video about it when I was working there. Brad, he's like obsessed with Santa Clarita for some reason. He has like a in his office, he has like a crazy like Trumper shrine with like Trump Legos and whatever, like just memorabilia I didn't even know existed for this thing. But he's like obsessed with Santa Clarita for this reason. And I think a lot of his like he was a former porn star too. That's why he like owns a strip club and like sex shop. But he's like all his friends are there and he's like obsessed with it, but like for some reason doesn't live there.
Oh,
Anyways,
really?
tangent.
So then like were you aware of all of this stuff as a kid? Like, like little kid you see just like why is it? Or did you just take it in and like assume that notice it when you left, you know?
Okay, I always say this, and I think, but not to trauma dump. I always say that I was like reborn in the valley because I really don't remember much of growing up in Santa Clarita besides like the like tail end of when I was like making the transition from high school to college, like
Okay.
teen. So it's like really weird. Like I don't think I noticed it until I left. No, I didn't even leave. I was still living there, just commuting. But like
Yeah,
until
yeah,
going to school and like learning about like being a person.
yeah. Crazy. And then Castañeda, where's that? Are you like what global south area of the world are you from?
My family's from well, my dad's family's from Mexico. I grew up 2 streets away from them. They're from Zacatecas and
Okay.
Milpitas. But I have family all over Mexico now, and my mother's Irish, which um greatly makes me a powerful alcoholic.
Oh wow, yeah, yeah.
But that's where
Uh,
I'm from. And
do you go down to Mexico? Because I had Abdiel Lopez on a while back. Or they are a like a curator. I lost touch with them, but I'm gonna wait for this plane. Can you hear it or no?
I don't
Oh,
hear it.
okay, never mind. Then I won't wait for the plane. It's just like so loud in the room. Yeah. So, but it like I feel like from watching Abdiel's stuff, like you Instagram, there's like a. Do you go to Mexico? There's is what is the scene? Is it like it? They were like they would post a lot about Perrando. Is that like is your experience that it's like a queer friendly community? Because I don't really know how that plays out.
I don't honestly, I like disappointingly don't go as much as I wish I did, especially like my proximity to Tijuana.
Mm.
Um, Also just like broke, but I'm really hoping I can go down to Mexico City or like Guadalajara soon. Um,
I've seen
and
some wild
like,
parties and like and trans performers and drag queens, so it
totally.
it
My
it
friend,
kind of defies like I think what people's expectations of like homophobia, down
oh,
there is.
I think also like just like total like ignorance and racism, thinking that like the people who live there like aren't like it like intelligible or like living a life or something. Like it's
Yeah,
total
yeah, yeah.
because I know so many queer people from Mexico, period, and so many friends. But recently, my friend who did a project for my thesis, Alejandrina Medina, who's like an amazing. She's like 24, getting a PhD. Like she's so smart and cool. But she was just on like a research trip down to Mexico City, and she just like hung out at like dyke bars and trans bars and you know what's crazy too is like all of them are like doing real work too, like they're all like real like activists, like they're like actually helping people. It's not like they're not just like sitting around reading books all the time, which I feel like
And lecturing people about what they read.
so frustratingly is like what you're like exposed to in grad school for so long is just like people throwing books at you and pretending
Yeah,
like
yeah.
work. So it seems rad, like it seems like really honestly like I don't know. Yeah, it seems great. I want to go. This is actually
Yeah,
my friend did a residency at Talleref in Guadalajara, and she brought back this tacos gay hat. And this like gay man has Eric 2022, owned
yeah.
really rad like gay taco shop in Guadalajara, I guess. So
That's awesome. I like that it's kind of like a campaign slogan too, because it has the date on it.
Eric 2022.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, that's always interesting to me because, like, yeah, I think that like it gets frustrating hanging out with like the art scene is so very much enamored with their own education, and like, and it makes sense because they're indebted for it, right? So you want to make it a bigger deal than it is,
Right.
but I think that like, yeah, man, I like there is something to that to what you said about like sort of just being dismissive of like other cultures and like I interviewed what's it called a long time a friend like Juan Pablo Hurtado and like he lives in I forgot, it's in Jalisco, but what's it called anyway, the like it's just normal life. I think the main thing that people probably get into contact with more than anything, or like the dangers are probably more related to cartel stuff from what I understood. I don't want to like, but that's our shit, that's American shit. Yeah,
Mhm.
like so it's interesting. But cool, man. I'm sorry, we've been going on for a while. Did you have a specific thing that you wanted to talk about, or did you have a specific topic?
Well, I'm very much also a cliche Libra, and so I've been like so indecisive about a topic. I went like
Well,
down
you
the
can tell me all 20.
I landed on one that I think is would be fun and I think kind of pertains to like place. But I went down the list. I was like, okay, like didactic, like memory, like archiving, collaboration, like all these things, right? And then I was like, this morning I was like, okay, let me just like put all of this up into like Chat GPT, uh, like an academic like like saying of like what a topic could be, and then it gave me like a shit ton. But
Oh
like
wow.
one that I like, that was Bars and Beyond, the role of gathering spaces and building communities. And I
Cool.
felt like that as a topic kind of sums up like where my mind is at post grad school, like reeling from all of that and like wanting to like keep the ball rolling in like, also I wanted to selfishly take advantage of the fact that I'm like actively right now engaging in an artist run initiative, which is your podcast, and to extract as much as I could from that.
In what sense? How can I make this a fruitful experience for you? Just bringing people to bringing attention to your practice,
Well,
or
my favorite question to ask people who like start like artist run initiatives is like, how are you thinking of this thing?
oh,
Which,
about the podcast?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, at this point, I mean, I've been doing this on and off for 5 years. Like I took a, it was really hard during COVID. I didn't want to do Zoom. Then I started to do Zoom. Then I just realized I wasn't prepared because like COVID was like a trauma experience for everybody, I think. I definitely felt like I was furious and I was not in a place to like speak publicly. And but at this point I think of it as a business. Like, it's just to keep it going, I have to. I also have participated, as you know, in other other like artist run initiatives. I really do not believe in collectives anymore. I
mm,
really feel like artist run collectives are great for people. That's fine and stuff, but it just seems like a lot of work and a loss of money
mm,
in a community that you don't even necessarily get a say in who's in it.
right, right,
So I think I definitely like I joined a community and then all the people that I liked had left already.
right,
And then I felt like I had been left paying the bills to
right,
keep the thing alive,
right,
and then I was like, and then I didn't even get a say in things. So it can be like, I think that like when you talk to a lot of people that are in that kind of thing, it's difficult like those collaborations, sustaining them can be pretty rough.
right,
But I mean, that's not to say like I do think of I do think of the show as a community, right? Like I'm interacting with people regularly. And for me, this is much more pleasant. I have like one-on-one relationships with people. People come in, people go. Some people I have longer, like, some people become my friends. Some
right,
people are just acquaintances that I see at shows. So it really like I first started thinking about this as a way to just meet people.
right.
And then it just became the thing that I like the most out of all the stuff.
I think
So
that's been like so interesting about like seeing it happen is this sort of like managing the intentionality, right? Like,
this show, you mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the
Oh,
way you,
thank you.
it's like, I think really careful sounds like you're trying to like avoid like discomfort, but it's like careful in that it's considered, and like the goal feels like I think I liked that topic that like ChatGPT generated because it says like gathering space, and I was like, oh, this is literally a gathering space. Like we, despite it being,
Yeah.
thank you for accommodating the Zoom, but yeah, we're in a gathering space, which I thought, I don't know, it was just interesting to me and like made me feel like less stressed about speaking, and I don't know, like we're
Oh,
hanging.
really?
It's nice,
It's
yeah.
one of the things that's weird to me. Like the more I do this, the more there's a disconnect between me and the guests in terms of what their expectations are and what mine are. For
Right,
me, I'm just going to sit down with somebody and have a conversation that I would not otherwise get to have in any other human context,
right,
which
right,
is like, and so that's why it's really specific for me to like wanting to have like people pick the topic, because we could talk about you growing up and all of that, and like if it but it's just, I'm just more, I think artists tend to have like a sense of research.
right,
And I think like, I have profound affections and connections to people that I don't talk to, but
right,
I like, I'll see like, for example, Renee Forrest blew my mind with one conversation. We don't really interact other than like she'll post something that reminds me of the conversation that we had, and I'm like, and I reference it, like we talked about like how the world might be a simulation. So anytime and she had a really convincing argument for it. But like those things, like it like I guess I nah, and now I feel cheesy, but since you're talking about it, I feel like ultimately I'm gathering, like these experiences, right? So then so then when I'm talking to guests and they're like really smart and they're nervous, I'm like, what are you talking about? But I mean, it makes sense. Like I do this weekly, so I'm like desensitized to the process, you
Right,
know.
right.
Yeah. So yeah. What have you learned from your experience with the like the gathering spaces, drinking aside, because it can be nerve wracking, but it's I think when you're standing in a gallery, at some point you just got to get comfortable standing. And if
Hmm.
you're comfortable standing, you're not awkward, so you're welcoming, you
Right.
know.
I
And it's
think that
easier to do that with alcohol. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I think the biggest thing I've learned, and this came from working with my friend Alejandrina, like part of my work is still going to like bars and queer spaces, and and it's interesting seeing them in a new light, of course, but that aside, I remember a conversation I was having with her, and we were just like sitting at the edge of the bar, like looking over this. It's one of our favorite bars, just like looking at all the people in the space. I'm making it sound like it's huge. It's a tiny bar. But and then she just like looked at me and she's like, at the end of the day, like all of these people are working fucking people in whatever they do. A lot of them in this bar are like activists and like have like projects that like help the community. And she was just like, at the end of the day, like everybody's looking for a place to sit and like rest their fucking feet. Like we're
Yeah.
tired. Like the world is hard and people like are getting hurt every day, especially like in our community. Like it's hard to be alive, and I think that really helped. And this was like before I even started like fabricating the work, and like and it doesn't even necessarily mean like chairs or anything, like putting us, I don't know, but also sometimes that gesture is like simple enough, like putting a place to sit or like having a place to sit, a place to go, um is really special. And I think for me, I learned a lot. I mean, it's still a process. Like the communication is key, and that sounds like so cliche, but I think it's like that's like the fact. And I think that's what's also special about this is it like centers conversation, right? Like it's dialogue, which is like I just like read this really fun book, not to be like a book reader. I don't know, or something,
Sorry, get out.
but it was like a book on social practice, and the first like few paragraphs are just about socializing. And I really believe in the power of socializing, and I think that had a lot to do with my like substance abuse, was like that helped facilitate a lot of socializing for me and like got a lot of thoughts rolling, honestly. And now the practice is about like making up where like the gaps are from my memory or something. But yeah, and I think that is what was special, like down to like both like the formal conceptual, like all these elements in a practice, and like also just in my life and like my values. There's something about like seeing people be able to just like go and like kick their shoes off or something while they're looking at art that is like so fucking magical and special to me, and like that feels revolutionary. And I remember like after the second performance in my thesis, we like played Talking Heads. It like ends with the Talking Heads song, and then it just like the like phone, however, whatever DIY way we had that song playing, just started playing like a playlist.
Mhm.
And like for some reason, it was like all the songs that you would want to hear, like in this like pseudo bar space that is like now a mess after this performance with like dirt and champagne everywhere. And all my friends were just like laying in the dirt, playing in the dirt, or like sitting on these like sculptures that I made and like eating
Yeah.
salt vinegar chips, or like still sitting in the audience, but like with their friends chatting, or like just like making jokes and like kind of making like, I don't know, just like so vulnerable and like so slippery and like glooping and glopping around. And like, I don't know, I feel like this is a weird tangent now, but I think
No, no, go tangents are what we need.
what is like what I've learned also is that I have that ability to make that space, which I think is really special. And that's
Yeah.
that's me finally like not being an insecure 23-year
Yeah,
old
yeah, yeah.
school. Like I want to own my power, and like the way that I've been able to make a cabaret, also like not disregarding its flaws. Like all these spaces come with their flaws, and I think that's important. But if I like get caught up thinking about those flaws, that's gonna like ultimately like completely halt the urgency I feel to like hang up these like warm bar lamps that
Mhm.
people feel comfortable sitting with and like being quiet with. Like I remember installing, I was like on like a 20-foot ladder, like hanging a lamp, and one of my friends, Junie Min, who was going to perform as a part of the work with Alejandrina, she like was having a rough week and just like came and sat in the installation while I was working because it was like dark and I was hanging lights. And she just like came, put her notebook down, opened up her computer, and like just like sat, and we like worked quietly next to each other. And I think like not only is it the space, but I think it's like, again, to give myself a bit of credit now that I'm like not under the authority of like graduate school and I don't have a reason to be insecure or sad. Uh, like the work is me in that sense because like those
Yeah,
are the
yeah.
things I care about and like really value, and like I think that's the biggest, and trusting myself to like do this, like being so open to being like, I guess like ignorant and fail or something, like it will never be flawless. And the more you try to make it flawless, I think the more you avoid harder conversations around the work. Like I know where I fucked up in the
Yeah,
recent,
yeah.
like I know hard where, I could have done a lot of things better. And a
Like
lot of
what
has to do with like helping conversation. Yeah.
so then what like do you mind sharing the example of what specifically you like what you could do better next time? Like what were you not happy with? Because I mean, I'll interject real quick with a story that I thought of just to give you what I'm thinking of where you've put my head. So I used to have this thing called the TV Begun back like in the early, well, it must have been early 2000s because I wasn't living here yet. So it was basically a remote control that would cycle all the TV codes of the current televisions, and you could always update it, right, with the new models that were coming out, and it would just cycle through them and turn TVs off. So I went to this bar called The Bar, conveniently enough, in Coral Gables, and it was one of those bars that had all the TVs on, all the basketball was going, and I just started having fun turning it off. And I like, my friends knew, but like I just quietly, like and they would turn them back on, and I just kept turning them off until they gave up, and the vibe in the room changed entirely. No
Right.
one was half distracted because there wasn't anything moving. So like those little subtleties, I think, is that what we're talking about? Like the things that affect the dynamics.
I think so, because that's also like something that I feel really attracted to is like the things that we don't necessarily see as altering the experience tend
Mm-hmm.
to be the things that like form the experience, the things that might be shoved to the side a little bit, like the dust collecting on the TVs that you turned off feels like
Yeah.
extremely valuable, right? Like if you dust the entire bar, then you're gonna go in and you're gonna notice, like it's gonna feel different or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, for sure.
Um, but I think also like again, like so clichély, like I think that maybe I think I maybe not intentionally got caught up in like, and I think this is a problem, right? Like when we create projects and try to like get rid of our authorship, like that comes from like a weird like wanting to absolve ourselves of like privilege or something, which is
Yeah,
like,
which art in itself is a privilege, essentially.
and I think that like maybe in the facilitator role that I maybe started to like subconsciously like maybe I was like too much like, oh, this is your project, which like
Yeah,
no, it's
yeah.
not. Like it's we're doing this together, like I'm physically fabricating a space, and I think I could have been more honest in communication and like how I was feeling through the process, and like also just like asked questions more,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, which I like learned what questions I need to ask, and I think also like just blatantly asking for help, like my body afterwards, like I was I was bad. Like I did everything that my mentors from undergrad told me not to do, which was like hurt myself. Like I fucking like now like my hand still hurts from like lifting those fucking stages up by
Mm-hmm.
myself. Like I don't need to be lifting 100-pound stages on my own. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
insane.
Yeah. And then
And
I mean that affects your performance within the context of the space, right? If you're hurt, if you're yeah. I've
if I'm
done that. I've
showing up,
sorry, go ahead.
if I'm ignoring myself, I'm not showing up right. you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Exactly. I've done episodes where I just was not uh where I thought I had it and I just was too tired. And those don't come out. But I mean they don't happen that much anymore, but they did in the early days where I was like, you learn. The other thing that's pretty cool about those spaces, about the kind of space, like I went to a show with I'm interviewing Liz Walsh this week, and she curated a show in at Discount Mirrors. I forget what it's called. It has a cool name. I forget the name of the show. She'll tell me when I have her on the show. But but it had like so many people that I know that kind of knew each other before I met them, right? But there's a couple things that happen when you like show up to that space versus like I've decided like close to me. So I've just decided that when I go out for drinks on Saturday, if they have an opening, I'd rather go there. Not that they have drinks. I mean, it's like beer officially, right?
Like,
Um, but because yeah, but what's it called? Yeah, those like one of the things that Mario once like said Mario Vasquez said in his interview that like really resonated because he's such a like there's just a vibe that radiates from him, right? You know what I mean? Like you see him, he's just he puts you at ease, and he just said go where you're wanted, go where you're loved, you know? And
right.
yeah, and that resonated so much because I mean I literally spent a bunch of time in the last 2 years not only being in a place that didn't really want me from the beginning. They what's it called? Like the show is blown up after I stopped interviewing those people.
Right.
you know? So like it's doing much better. And I really think that is like, man, if I already told Mario, but I wanted to publicly said that is like a really profound thing. Like,
Oh,
why
totally.
would you why would you waste time trying to be accepted? So if you get to curate that space, I mean, people that are coming to that space are coming there to support you,
Right.
right? And that's why it's so fun. That it makes it fun for them. They get something out of that. Because as the guest at Liz Walsh's show, I felt good being there to hype up my friends, and it was crowded as f.
Right.
Yeah,
I I feel like, well, no, I don't even feel like, I know that the thing I told myself to get me through this last year of grad school was like I have a lot of love to give, and I'm not going to let the institution take advantage of that anymore. And I'm going to
yeah,
do what I want to do, which is create a project and like leave here with a practice, a foray into a practice that is like completely dedicated to like the loving and sharing of love of very specific people and very specific community. And I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
like a bandit these like academic texts that are gonna make me like be taken seriously, and I'm like not gonna look back. And I think that that hearing Mario say that like that's the goal, is like
Yeah, yeah.
that's the space, like that's why we feel like we can take our shoes off, right? Like
Mhm.
we don't feel like we need to like run or something. I don't know. Like,
And I feel like universities have become these like different institutions than they were. I mean, they've always been overtly liberal in a way that reflects Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan a little bit more than we would like to acknowledge. But I mean, Nixon was a liberal, right? Um, it like liberals used to be right wing, or like Margaret Thatcher, So it is. But as it's become more and more commercialized, it's just a hostile space, like like uh like the politics that were happening at least in the 60s were anti-war. Right now there's almost this Puritan push that's happening in these institutions, which is like crazy. That's not my idea. Leslie Muse put me onto that, or Leslie Foster put me onto that, but I or verbalized it that way. I mean, I was aware of it, but it is really crazy. Like it's like you always think that the generation that follows is going to be rebellious in the same way that you are, but it's
like
almost conformist, right? Like in a very, very almost uncomfortable way. That's
yeah,
why I'm much happier avoiding it. It's not like being on YouTube is any less restrictive and more, or more dangerous. But
confusing when you go like into an art program and you're expecting to be there with all these people who like quote like like abolitionists and then are like so violently cogs, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
not to like absolve myself from any of that, like I'm participating in it, right? I'm actively like applying to things in the capital A art world, like I know, but then it's confusing. I guess what's confusing to me is like I think something that was seen as valuable, and also like I'm still so young, and I think that's important to preface. Like I'm like I think I'm 26. I'm either 26 or 27.
That's still pretty young, yeah, man.
And I went from undergrad straight to grad school, and I was so naive, which I think is like fine. I think that like helped me ultimately in the end, that naivety, because it made me realize what I really cared about and like what my values actually were at the end. Because like I like what I thought and what my like intentional community thought in undergrad like was a valuable asset of mine was like I was like extremely emotional about art and like really believed in art. Like I would cry and critique because I thought some my like people's work was so beautiful and
Mhm.
impactful, and I would just like I could talk for hours about people's work. And then you go to this like leveled up space or something, and it's like you you get hurt if you
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
You get hurt if you like care hard about like somebody's work or something. Like it's weird. At least in terms of like in like the hierarchy, right? Like I don't know, it was weird, and I feel like this is also a weird tangent, but I feel like I like lost that. Like I found myself at the end like not like I couldn't cry when I saw my like friends like beautiful thesis shows. And I was like,
Mhm.
why the fuck am I not crying anymore about like art? Like that's a problem. Like that's a
Yeah.
huge to me. And I think like I like so like what happened to us like wanting to like make really beautiful work and like emotional work and like beautifully conceptual work that's about like really beautiful intense things that like I have friends like making the craziest work that's just like I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
talking
No,
about.
no, that's fine. I mean, I'm listening and it makes sense. I would say that like it is also really hard to have somebody regiment creativity for you, you know, like it's just I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to go to grad school or to go to, I just, first of all, I'm not getting into a UC program. So like that shit is expensive outside of that, you know, like going to private schools. I got into Cal Arts, and that was when I saw that they wanted me to get $300,000 in debt. I was like, oh, this makes absolutely no sense for me. I know that other people have like different. I don't want to. I like, you know, people. Everybody makes their own decisions on how they're going to go through in the world, and who am I to tell them? There's an incredible amount of pressure to go to grad school, you know. And I had to basically do this. Like that's one of the reasons that I did this. I wanted to just steal from people's education,
Right.
essentially. That's the topic problem, you know. And if I talk to people that have the education, I can still, at you know, if I can hang with them, does it matter that I have an MFA or not? You know, it is very much like I do have a chip on my shoulder about school. My BFA program was brutal, like unnecessary, needlessly, you know.
What's crazy too is they act like when you're there they you owe them something. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
owe them my hurting body at the end.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
the idea of having to like get to the end of your thesis and have a defense is crazy. Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've done so much work here for you. And like on it's just wild. And it's also like I can confidently say that in any class within my department, the visual art department, I there's not a single thing that I learned from anyone other than my friends in my cohort.
Yeah, yeah.
The structure, the classes, like none of it was like useful,
Yeah.
you know, which that's going to sound so toxic and crazy, I think,
No,
to
I don't. I relate to that. That resonates with me, and I mean that's why I just didn't want to do it again. 100%. I had a miserable experience, but like what people forget. Look, one of the things that's really fucked up is, first of all, we're in a you're in a space where everybody's an adult, but there's clearly a power structure, and people are able to fuck each other. You
oh,
know?
the the power structure, they like fiend off of it. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, they need like to some degree, if you're not conforming to being a this guy artist or this woman artist or this person artist, you know, like you kind of have to become uh like there's a loss of individuality when you have to become someone's like fan, you know, like you have to click with someone and like their work, and what if you don't, you know, or what if you know. And then the other thing that I think happens is like at some point you're still 27, so you're probably around the age where you're like, and part of, I think this might be part of why you're having a hard time crying, is that the context has probably changed for you because you understand the art world a lot more clearly, you
oh yeah,
know, like, you know, who's going to buy your stuff ultimately? Do you like their politics?
right, exactly. Which is another reason why I like stopped. I
Yeah,
also don't
yeah.
like I will confidently identify as bitter because I am,
That's
but
fair.
I'm also still very grateful too. Like I still wouldn't have met the people I had met and like expanded the community so much more without having this opportunity, and like the space too alone to fabricate and like facilitate these things has been really powerful and important. But I think like I see my colleagues who like want to be educators, and I'm so excited and ready for the shift to happen because I don't think in art schools we have educators anymore. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
people who get like really turned on by the fact that they get six figures and like show at like MoMA,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
that's cool. That's really cool. I don't think you need to be an educator though. Like
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
really bad at it. And I think like that's also that hurts. That like hurts. Like especially in programs when they like bring so many people they who like don't operate with a lot of privilege, don't live with a lot of privilege, and then like take advantage of that and like make them become like part of their like marketability or something.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a traditional white person, like white wasp thing, you know? Like one of the things that I've been like everybody like it's like the things that people say about race in this country are so catchphrasy that they don't even listen to it, right? Like they'll say stuff like uh there's a difference between race and ethnicity. And yeah, there is, but you know, ethnicity includes multitudes, right? Ethnicity is a cultural element. And you can have, like, for example, I'm Cuban. I grew up with Cuban kids that were brown, right? And just because I'm a Latino, people say the most racist shit. They assume that I'm homophobic. They assume all these things in California. And it's like, it's so bigoted in this, like, in this entitled way, right? And like, you hear people talk about Russians, and I'm like, yo, those aren't like, you know, like this is what causes shit like the Holocaust when you start marginalizing people like race, you know, that's still racism. Ethnic, like racist, like bigotry towards ethnicity is part of the racist thing. I mean, you're like me, white passing somewhat, you know, so I'm
uh,
sure you what's that?
I said I'm white as fuck.
Well, I mean, I just say that I'm white, but
Yeah.
because it's easier out here. But yeah, I mean, like I, in terms of, I don't have indigenous blood, but I'm not white like from fucking Germany. You stand me next to one of those dudes, and he starts getting ideas in the 1940s. You know?
Yeah. I think that applies too to like I think that's what's like important to like I hate that like I don't even hate it. Like my bitterness is my driving force, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
I I also am like not attempting like shift the paradigm or like the canon or like change the world, but like I want to get the people who are also actively taken advantage of in these like larger contexts, like the fact that I now like can apply to art grants to get bitches paid is like
yeah.
is like that's it, you know? Like that's
Well, I
and
also want to give you some credit because, sorry, go ahead.
another failure that I don't want to call it a no, failure's cool. Queer art of failure. Jack Halberstam, whatever. Uh something that like I was really disappointed in myself like doing the thesis is I like let a grant slip away from me that would have like
Yeah.
provided so like so much more support for the people involved other than myself. And like that was a big learning lesson. And like learning that like something like I don't want to proceed unless like I have that stuff for people
Hmm.
like ready, you know, like I will not unless like it's something much more unless we can like the first cabaret like that was low stakes and like I didn't need funding, you know, right? I don't know how to describe it, like the difference between the two because they sound very similar, but I think like ultimately like I don't know. I don't know. I lost
Well,
my
I
train.
would also say, man, I would give you a little bit more credit than you're giving yourself in terms of perspective. You just got out of the program, you know. Time is going to change the way you feel about things, right? Like obviously you're what you're saying is valid and I hear it and I relate to it, you know. That's why I didn't go to school. I was like, I don't want to be part of an institution. Like all these institutions are dogmatic as fuck and they're so anti-religion, but they're like it's like you don't see the ideology behind what you where you're at and like where it comes from, like a very colonialist, like, you know. One of my but I would give you credit like that. One of my favorite things to shit on is hyperallergics, which is probably not a good idea because then they'll never hire me. But their TikTok or their Instagram, that the lady that does that, to me, she's such an example of smug white privilege of American, right? Like it's all like in support of indigenous and queer people, but it's mostly performative. And one time they came out like they did a post about like how I don't know if you're familiar with Graham Hancock, but he's a guy that is like he's into alternate history and like they went out of their way and he disputes like some of the dating in what's it called in Egypt and all of this stuff, right? And so this woman comes on the I don't know her name. This woman comes on the TikTok and she's like, uh yeah, it's racist archaeology, like, and it goes against archaeology. And I'm like, bro, you're calling this guy racist and you're not acknowledging archaeology for its fucking theft and like pure colonialism. It's like much more brutal than any fucking like ancient aliens shit that this guy might be saying, which apparently it's not, but like it's just entertaining like speculative stuff. And that shit used to be all over Discovery Channel. Like no one shits on all these like documentary, you know, what in Miami, one of my
Right.
least favorites in the early 2000s, one of my least favorite things that people would say was, I saw this documentary. I'm like, no, you fucking didn't. You watched the Discovery Channel. And it's the same shit, you know?
There's something about even just like the language of the Discovery Channel that's so funny to me. Like the
Yeah.
uh, I think a lot too, like it reminds me a lot of just like like these when thinking about like these social projects or something or like these like spaces of gathering for like community and artists, we often like don't like it's so easy, especially on the institutional level, especially from a place of privilege, to criticize anything we see and to like offer critique when like we don't even listen. Like I teach a lot of in when I am teaching, I teach my students to like look before we think we see things, you know? Like what are we actually looking at? And then
Mhm.
we can have a conversation. And I think it applies in this context of like um just like we don't allow the willing participant in these projects or the people or like the to like speak for themselves. Like we don't let people involved speak for themselves. Like we immediately jump
Mhm.
to which I think is like so violent. Like I remember like reading carceral aesthetics in like one of my classes, and the first thing people did was like jump to critique it. And it's like, okay, can we wait for a sec? Like I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
like there's an awareness in this work that like this is early this I don't know. I just like don't feel like we're always in a position to critique when like we're not fully
You haven't heard the whole thing.
either
Yeah.
like you know. And like I think there's in like these community organizations and these spaces like we from the outside like jump to wanting to say things and like be critical and be like, oh, this is that, this is this they should do. It's like, okay, well, like let's go inside let's like talk to the willing participant. Let's see who this work is helping, who is this for, and then maybe, and then also like it also becomes really problematic because then it's like we like assume ignorance of the person doing the work, right? Like we
Mhm.
assume that they're not aware of like the pitfalls you feel agency to critique, you know, and
Yeah,
that's like
yeah, yeah.
thing.
And
Um,
they're in it, so they probably have much more, they're probably having to make moral calculations and stuff like that. The one thing I will say is going back to like, like the whole NGO scene. I grew up in the UN, or at like as a UN brat. I wasn't working for them when I was a baby, but but I got to see a lot of these like situations where you have American people living in Africa making 100K minimum, and this was in the 90s, or no, sorry, 80s and 90s, like, and they're working alongside people that are like getting paid, you know, in comparison to their place. A lot of these institutions, like, I mean, look, we're in one of the most right-wing cities, Los Angeles, or I'm in one of the most right-wing cities. I'm sure San Diego is not. The whole brand does not match. Like the only thing they care about, that like they're only pro queer, like that they do not care about people. They do not care about poverty. It's all a real estate grab. People that I've know that have lived, that I know that have lived here their entire lives, are never going to be able to afford a house here. You can imagine getting priced out just through your life of your own town. You can't live here. Like all your friends, all of that shit gone, you know, unless you rent for the rest of your life. It's a crazy, crazy like I don't think people realize that they are right wing when they say that they're liberals. They are like they are saying that they do not care about working class people. That's what liberalism is. It's tolerance. It's getting people up into it's getting diversity among the upper class, not helping the lower class.
right. I think people identify as liberal to like make their lives easier,
Yeah, I don't fuck that. I don't do that shit.
absolve them of their sins and make them like not do work. Not
They
that
don't
like
even know what they are. They don't even know what they believe. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just like I think about like it's like it really isn't my responsibility to like I shouldn't be the one who is like this like 27-year-old artist trying to find money for my community, right? Like we should just be like handing that shit out, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
boom boom institution, but like we have individual responsibility and like just like being this thing like doesn't like make you like you still have to show up.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
casting a vote for Biden like doesn't stop like trans people from being shot in the head every day. Like sorry to be the one to tell you that. I don't know where
It
you've been.
didn't. It didn't get kids out of cages.
Period. Like it doesn't do any of this. Oh, God,
No,
that's a
no,
whole.
we don't have to go down that road. We
But
could
it
go, but I like your bitterness and I respect it. I'm a very bitter. I don't want people to think I'm not bitter. I need to show that sometimes because I'm a cynical fuck, you know?
well, I heard recently that somebody like from the program I'm in is like was like avoid the bitter people, and I was like, how are you not a how that didn't compute, and maybe because I'm so bitter, but I'm like, I think you're misunderstanding that my like placed bitterness is still like informed by like really sincere intentionality and like wanting to foster a practice that like takes seriously everything I do. And
Mhm.
like if whether it's like bitterness or blissful ignorance fueling this thing that I think does like have positive cause and effect in terms of like whatever small bubble I'm in the global context, then like why are you trying to sabotage that by telling people to avoid the bitterness? You
Yeah.
know? That makes
You're
sense.
gonna be avoiding all the poor people. That's literally what they're saying.
That's like where my thought process is. It's like you're going out of your way to like sabotage something that like
Yeah, yeah.
you feel so emboldened to like you're just misunderstanding how it, and like what that informs.
Well, they're just as guilty of white supremacy and American exceptionalism as any Republican. They just dress it nice, you know. They like. I mean, I don't like the term Latinx being applied to my mother. You know, like do you identify as Latinx?
No, that's
But you're
like
non-binary, so I fucking high five.
like but like didn't like white people make that up?
Exactly. It's academic bullshit. Anyway,
But
I have a whole other episode coming out and I've been nervous about it. You've given me a lot of relief. I'm just going to blame you when people come after me.
well, it's not how it would be pronounced. Like
Well,
I
it's just a white word. And okay, one of the things that I didn't get to say in the conversation that's coming out about this is that look, man, it is the same problematic shit white liberals do all the time. They always want to homogenize something and erase it. Before Common Era is one of the most egregious crimes on historical accuracy, because if you take away the context, then it's just a subversive thing that exists in the world and we don't even think about why we count from there. It
right,
needs to be in the forefront. And then the other thing that is insane, what was it? Anyway, the thing with the Latinx thing is basically like you're erasing the fact that my mother had a much harder time finding work than your mother. And Latino as a broad term encompasses Latinx, encompasses Latinas, you know, it's a Latino couple. And why is that? There's a reasoning behind that. It developed like that for a reason. It's not because we're machistas. It's because we came. There's like people in Latin America aren't calling themselves Latinx. They don't, or are calling. They don't even call themselves Latino because they don't have. It's an American identity of people who have, you know. And people argue, oh, but it's a colonialist language. Yes, but that's what we have in common, you know. And like, and it is a truth. You can't whitewash the truth to make yourself feel better. You know, I haven't watched that show Brighton, but I think that shit's kind of dangerous. Where there's like, you know, I mean, it's cool, but like that's
right.
not that's not the world that black people are ever going to live in. I think in my lifetime where like where they have that level of acceptance. So it's just this weird like it's just this liberal like thing that they just need to the world to be how they believe now. And if Latin Americans resist to this, then fuck it, you're racist, you know, or you're homophobic or you're transphobic.
It's like that thing about like my fellow white folk who like they need to be like in relation to something or like a part of something. I don't know how to properly say this in order to like see it as like human or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
so like we need to identify, we need to like understand in order to like give a shit about it, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And like that's where I feel like that comes from a lot of the time. And I think it's also like I'm not in the position to like say like I will respect the way people identify, and I have so many friends who identify as Latinx, but I have an issue when like people are like it's always people who look like me telling people that they are Latinx or like
Yeah,
saying
yeah, yeah.
it without like asking if like the brown person in the space who like is queer like I like uses that vernacular or something. And then it's like that assumption feels also like really like oppressive or something. Like you
Yeah.
out by asking my pronouns and like but then on like the inverse like people just like I have so many friends I don't know like you can't just like go up to like brown people calling them Latinx like
No, no, no. I would
like
never just assume what your pronoun is.
fucking idea what that is.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like so my family doesn't know what that is. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's not real to them.
And like and all of this like you know, we got an election coming up. I'm going to be cringing so hard when everybody's like vote for the most vulnerable people you know. And I know part of them are talking about brown people from like Mexico or from Guatemala or from El Salvador, and I'm like, bro, these people don't even necessarily agree with you on abortion and you're using them to promote yourself as a compassionate white savior. It's fucking disgusting.
People exist under the impression that like white American socialism is a universally understood like thing in especially in the global south, and it's like I don't think you understand like what socialism means to somebody who's not from America. I don't think you know what communism means to somebody who's not from America. I don't think you know
Well, I'm
what
Cuban. I mean, it's a brutal fucking thing.
it's
Like,
really intense. That's why I'm like, if you when people are like, I am socialist, I'm like, hmm, okay. Like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I don't know what to do with that. That's
When someone from El Salvador, Nicaragua tells me they're socialist, then I fucking listen because they have been in civil wars over that shit. You know, their military had death squads in El Salvador that just fucking most people down. So, anyway, going back to like less upsetting topics because we can talk about this, but I don't know. I don't also want to alienate every single liberal in the art world because that is my audience. I want to maybe convince them, but are you familiar with Kay Nattel, Other Places Art Fair founder? Have you
uh
have you
like
been to Other Places Art Fair?
I haven't. I feel like it started
Can
to like
I encourage you to apply for next year because when the because you got a project that fits that you could do like a cabaret there. I'm gonna be I applied. I don't know if I'm in. I don't want to be presumptuous, Kay. But I think that you might find a happy home there because I definitely love it there.
literally just looking at it this morning actually. So it's really weird that you bring it up because I didn't actually know who founded it
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then realized she was on the podcast.
Oh yeah, she's amazing, man. We recorded it at the location, so you have an insight on
Yeah.
the place. I'm a huge fan. I mean, like there's no podcast without that, without and without Made in LA. Like those two things, I can never turn my back on those two projects because there's that I did that's those are my baby incubator.
Those are the things too that I'm like really interested. Like I feel grateful to be in San Diego right now because I think there's a lot of really great people doing like these like independently led initiatives. Like there's Here in Journal, which is a great journal. Um, and it's just like some of the most beautiful writing of like art that I've ever read. There's Lizzie who has like her own gallery out here, 2 rooms that's just in the front of her studio. There's Joe Yordi
Mhm.
who has a space that he just started, and there's like all these like really great things. And then there's stuff in LA too. Like I want like those are the kind of people I want to converse with because like these projects like I've had to put so much on the back burner because like certain things have shifted really
Yeah,
rapidly.
yeah, yeah.
Like the big main project that I was originally like writing grants for that like had to that's like on the back burner was like attempting to create like a multi-use artist residency in my childhood home's like backyard. Um and I just like look at all these people who are doing it. I'm like, okay, how do I reorient myself to do it here? Like now that I don't have this like house, this like access to the space that I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
what what are the other ways to do that? And that comes a lot from like the also thinking of abundance and like how do I apply to things that like make this happen? How do I talk to these people who are doing it, right? Like during COVID, like people were creating really beautiful digital galleries, and like
Mhm.
there's ways to do it. And I think like I look at people, like I look at projects, like I look at stuff like this, I look at like other places art fair, and I'm like, okay, like what was the abundance that was created out of that like got it going? And like we all have different access to different resources, but at the end of the day, like these are like artist-led initiatives, and like that is like what I don't know, I guess I don't really know. Yeah, like it's like how I guess that's why I asked the question, like how were you thinking of this? Because I think
Yeah.
allowing myself to like know how people think about these things helps me understand like how I think about the abundance that I have or something.
Have you had a chance to listen to Kay's episode?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
I should.
you just noticed it today. You were saying, right? I think that she's going to be very helpful. Like that, the what she talks about in that episode is going to be very helpful. She has turned it into a 501 genes, which is what I say, but it's a 501c. Um, and what's it called? Yeah, you know, like you do one of these things. This is what has happened to me. I feel like I answered your question more directly earlier, but to add on to that, you start something like this and you don't know what it is. You just start, you know,
Right.
and I mean, like so many episodes in, I I'm like nervous to go back and listen to it, but it stays up
Right.
because it's the whole journey, right? Like now you see that I had a co-host in the beginning.
Right.
Then I started interviewing people. So the concept was completely different. It was just a way of me hanging out with my friend, and then I was like, it's a way to make friends like regularly on a weekly basis, right? But yeah, now it's a business, and I think similarly for Kay, she's doing all these crazy things that she just did. That it's the same idea of wanting to fund and give funds, which is not something that I can instruct you on or that I really have experience with, because there's no money coming in really. Like and subscribe, guys. And we do have a Patreon if everybody wants to join. But go ahead.
But that's useful though. Like I feel like the recent thought I've been having too is like, why do I keep thinking about money? And like the reality is like my body can't do certain things anymore.
Yeah.
And fine, but it's also like I guess also thinking back to the original cabaret, like I didn't realize how valuable it was until I listened to the people participating when like it wasn't happening. People were like, I miss it, or I'm looking forward to it. Like the fact that people were looking forward to this thing that was like so silly, and it was like me just hanging clamp lights, climbing on like huge ladders, putting like curtains I
Mm.
dyed green, like like just like stupid shit. But like when you like reorient to just like realizing, like I could only imagine how, maybe I can't speak on their behalf, but how cool it'd be to hear somebody talking about other places art fair with like such just like admiration as the person who founded it, like
Oh, I
that,
mean, I'm basically just telling her how important she is to me. So it,
that like that's like
yeah,
that's
yeah. No, but honestly, what I would say is keep going, and it will evolve. It to me, it reminds me a little of the Dadaists, which were kind of absurdists, which I think is pretty fitting for this time. They used to do the happenings. There was one dude who had a machine that was a drawing machine, and the whole point of the machine is that it just destroyed itself as it went. There are all these quirky like things that were happening when like it's that like I feel like we have a similar feeling of helplessness in terms of like ability to activate change, right? I mean, I try to have conversations that might get me kicked off of YouTube, but I try to skirt the line. I try to still fit within those parameters, which is funny. Like it's a funny balancing act, but at any point, like right now, it's weird to even be trying to do a YouTube show because all these huge creators are getting this thing called the invalid traffic bug. So apparently all these channels that are like super kosher, just like super popular, have no political anything, they're losing like 90% of their traffic because the algorithm has come up with a new way to protect against people fake watching their videos, people paying for views. And so now it's over like reacting the system, and it's just like people are leaving YouTube in droves. So I'm
Right.
starting YouTube and I'm like, shit, I might not even fucking get there before like the whole thing it could be. You never know with these things. It's such a powerful tool, YouTube, that it could be an intentional implosion. Like you don't, it's been slowly happening. You don't necessarily want people to talk about this, like, because people want to be able to use the term white supremacy in inappropriate contexts and use
Right.
it as a weapon against like internal terrorism, which is the new thing we're fighting, right? Like, so it's a very strange thing, like to be, but you know what? The show's gonna keep going. I'm not gonna stop because YouTube might not be here.
Right.
The next thing will come and it'll still be a podcast no matter what, right?
Right.
So
Well, that's the thing too. It's like thinking back about like this bitterness, like it's keeping me going.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
still gonna
Spite makes many careers.
really, and also like that, like reframe it. Like I'm doing this in spite of all of this. I'm like we're
Yeah.
all doing this in spite of like what like it's reactionary. Like
I would also just say to spite, not in spite.
we're, we're, we're fucking artists. We're reactionary. We're
Yeah,
making work in a context. Like
yeah, yeah.
anybody who creates is making work in a context, whether or not whatever it is, whether you're like very, like you have like you're making like band show flyers or something,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that is like that's so beautiful to me, like that's
Yeah, no, and look, man, when I started this shit, it didn't start off like I was doing anything revolutionary, you
right.
know, but now it's becoming a little bit more important in certain ways, right? Like you like because someone's got to talk about this shit, right? Like in a way, or it's a way of not succumbing to the academic. Like you don't have to go to college to be a fucking smart person. That's the misnomer, right? Education on the left, on the quote unquote left, on the liberal right wing, is like it is so prohibitive now, right? And AI is coming, and all these people that are getting degrees. Like, what's gonna happen, man? Like, we're on that tipping point. It's a very strange place, you know.
Yeah.
Not to stress you out.
No, like, I hate this is just like another like random thing, but it's like we like I don't know. It's like
I
the
didn't know
way
you were such a radical, man. I like it.
just the way we talk about school too. I'm like, it's great. It's great that we help people get into school, but we put them into debt. And like that's it. I don't know. Like
I have a very hard time encouraging people to go to school.
just why like why are we confused about the fact that like like it's good to get certain people into school, and I think school could be really beautiful if you want to go, but like is it worth like at this point I'm convinced it's to keep poor people poor. Like I don't think you don't go to school, you don't go to grad school, you don't get a PhD, and then you don't become rich.
Yeah, yeah.
And
No,
like
no. Yeah.
the goal or anything, right? Like that's not like the point I'm trying to make, but it's like can we talk about the fact that there's like other means to the ends, like why are we like who are you encouraging to go to school, first of all, and like why did you benefit from school, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm very careful when students ask me for letters of rec. Like I will not send a student. I will not write a letter of rec for a student to go to CalArts because I have so many friends who have come out of there,
Everybody hates it.
and I'm like, I'm sorry, like I don't feel comfortable putting you like advocating for your debt, essentially. Like
Yeah.
unless you can come to me with like unless we like that sounds like I'm like not gonna do it, but if the student can sincerely sit down and meet with me and like talk about like why this is like the absolute move for them, you know? Like I've written letters of rec, but I just like don't want to send my students to like a bad school because they're gonna be if they're not coming from a place of like mommy daddy paying for their UC SD, funding, like whatever you call it. Yeah, funding, whatever. Then like I feel hesitant to like advocate for you to go to another place that like
Yeah.
might take even more advantage of you in terms of how much debt you're going to have. And like I went to a Cal State. Like I
Yeah, no, if
I was like a bad student. I was like violently addicted to pills. I was drinking all the time. I got a lot out of that because
yeah.
it didn't put me in violent debt, and I'm using and arguably like learned so much more. Like I don't know, it's like weird. It's weird to me. Like we why
When did
like
you graduate? When did you graduate? Do you know
2020. Yeah. I went straight into grad school.
do you know what you call it's Josh Vasquez and Elmer Guevara? They went there. But it might have been at a different time.
I'm not sure.
It's all good. No, I'm just curious. But I bring them up because like, you know, like those are like rational decisions. The decisions that they've made, like I haven't put out Elmer's episode yet, but he went to Cal State Long Beach, or no,
Right.
or yeah, that's a UC. You see, no,
Mm-mm.
no. What you see? Okay. Anyway, whatever. I don't. I obviously don't know what the fuck I'm talking about with schools. They're just like if you start getting into the SAICCC, like of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, all those acronyms I hate. But the yeah, like if you do that, I can advocate for that. If you go to like he went to Cal State Long Beach, and I think he went to someone, I forget what the name is called. It starts with an H, but it was a public school, like if you're doing that, that makes sense. But like when they told me that it was $160,000 for 1 year, and they gave me $1,000 scholarship. First of all, I was like, well, you guys don't want me. And secondly, I was like, uh, yeah, like I'm never gonna be able to make art because I'm gonna spend my whole life trying to pay this off. And to me is insane. Like that's literally $320,000 for 2 years.
I think it's important to go where the funding goes. Like I feel really lucky that I went to like a UC because it's fully
Yeah,
funded. But I'm also like actively like I am running out of money very, very fast. Like my bank account,
yeah,
I have rent to pay, I have bills to pay, and I'm like, no matter where you go, even if there's funding, like you're putting yourself into a financial deficit unless you have money ready, you know?
yeah,
Like I still had to make work, and then I'm unemployed in the summer, and then I had to figure that out. Like it's and we were lucky enough to receive rental assistance during the pandemic, so that like really helped allow me to like save some money for like the harder months. But like
mm,
we should normalize not always encouraging people to be poor, to have access to things like this, and then to have access
yeah,
to mentors, which I think goes back to like I'm really honored to be a part of a lineage of people who are older than me, like you, like Victor, like Kay, like all these people are doing these things, and again, like have found a way to like offer something, some sort of support that is not putting me in a deficit emotionally, physically, financially, to and like I'm being allowed to be a part of some sort of context right now. And
yeah.
like that is a lineage, especially because I'm influenced by work like this, like
Mm,
these are the things that I like look at like all the time. Like this is the work that I look at. And like I'm interested in like making it like a sculpture or something. But it's like how do we and I also like don't want to seem like I'm like discouraging people to go to grad school or something or to not go to school because I think the spaces are useful, right? Like they could be extremely useful. I just don't think that like CSUN, Cal State, Northridge did so much more for me. Like the
yeah, yeah,
fact that the entire Adobe suite was fucking free at Cal State Northridge, but not at UCSD for my students is bullshit. The fact
yeah,
that the syllabuses I'm handed make my students have to purchase these things if they want to work from home is bullshit. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. We are a military institution. That's bullshit. That's
yeah,
bullshit. I will never make one of my students purchase something.
yeah,
Never. And the fact that that's in these syllabuses blows my mind. The way we're making, especially artists, like these kids want to be artists, and the first thing we're telling them when they get to grad school is they need to pay for shit. When they get to undergrad, they need to pay for shit. They're 18. They're
yeah.
babies.
They don't
Like,
know. I didn't know.
why are we like yeah, you need supply. Like I just like there's also like sorry, you're a six-figure salary like faculty member. I know for a fact as a fucking TA that there's academic grants you could apply to get free materials for your students, but you are lazy and you don't do it.
Yeah,
You do it.
yeah.
I don't know where this anger
No,
just
no, that's fine. That's fine. I would say I think that my rule of thumb is this, man. If you don't want to teach, you could probably you can get around having an MFA and but you have to, but you can't not do something in that and expect it to happen. If you're not going to school for that, I would say it's hard for me to say that you don't need a BFA. That one's really hard. Like ultimately, because like you said, I learned a lot in that program, despite it being horrible. You get to think about art and work on art and stuff like that. And I'm a million miles away. Like I think back, I just wasn't a good artist back then. I just didn't figure. I mean, I had figured out things that I was interested in, but it wasn't like, I just quite wasn't there yet. Like, and so I would say that, but I would also remind you that, like, you know, on the other side, which you're saying you don't want to discourage people, like, you have a really good degree, right? Like, that is going to definitely open up doors despite the suffering and all of that, and you're not in a lot of debt. So I would say, if you either way, like, if you really are dying to teach, meet some fucking adjuncts first, because I used to be a soccer coach, and I would go from field to field, and then on Saturdays I would go coach games, and my life was exhausting, and it was the exact same life as professors, as adjuncts. They're
All of
teaching at 5 different colleges, at least in California.
yep,
Maybe it's a little bit different in other markets, but like, and then the idea of getting a tenured position in fucking California, I don't know, man.
yeah.
I don't know anybody that expects that.
All of my friends who are adjuncting are actively making less money than when we were TAing.
Yeah.
It's wild. And
Oh,
it's
I used to make as much money as them as a coach. Like,
right.
it was stupid. It was that's one of the reasons that I did. I'm like, what? I'm gonna go to school for 2 years to make a lateral move, you know, like, and then have to do more work.
That's why I feel really grateful to have this recent experience too. And like the degree I have, like opens up so many doors for me to not fall into the pitfalls that I see, like that I've identified in the spaces that
Yeah.
I like. Again, like being in this lineage, all of this work, I'm like, I like now have more opportunity to do it, and I have more opportunity to like reach out. I mean, like I'm hoping at some point, like I'm gonna be in a position where like these bigger projects that I want to do, like can give access to artists and students in a way that doesn't fuck them over. Like
Yeah.
one of the end goals, big projects that I'm like making mock-ups for right now so I can start applying to grants is like a mobile multi-use performance space that's like in a
Mm-hmm.
trailer. Like I want to make a theater
Mm-hmm.
in a trailer. And I just want to see where it can go and how people could use it. And I think it would be a great opportunity to like
Yeah.
it's there's just like so much more than what these places like make it seem like or something.
And then, to be fair, I don't know how to write grants, and it seems like you do. So that may be something that you learned from your education.
But I
I don't want to disparage everything. Go ahead.
myself that
Oh, you
I
taught yourself that?
there's no professional development in grad school. If you're listening to this, thinking about going to UCSD, unless you reach out and ask them what professional development courses they're going to have in the curriculum over the next 3 years, and they say nothing, like you don't learn any of this shit.
Oh,
I
wow.
learned this from friends. I learned how to write a grant because my friends would send me their grants.
Mm,
It's wild out there. Every
cool.
class was a critique class, and at a certain point, there's nothing to critique. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
That's
not.
crazy.
It's I taught myself this, and I don't even know
Yeah.
if I'm doing it right.
And you know what?
I
You
don't
don't
even
know
know
if you're doing it right.
teach myself how to make a syllabus. I had to teach myself how to make letters of rec, like these
Yeah.
covers for these positions, all of it. All of it. My friends taught me, I taught myself. I just recently sent my entire teaching portfolio to a friend because he just finished UCI and they don't fucking have that either. Like, sorry to be the one to tell you this, unless you already got some sort of institutional clout or you go to UCLA, like Southern California, California grad schools, like I don't see them doing anything for most people.
Yeah. I think
Just
that's pretty accurate. From what I see from UCLA and everybody else that goes to school, like, the UCLA people are just, they're just on a different plane. Like, it really is.
artist run initiatives I think are so in fucking important. Like
Yeah.
this that you are doing, I find so
Thanks.
much in because it is like it is separate, it's tactile, and it's sincere, and like you have just put me in another context, you know? Like I am
You're
now
gonna
in
make me cry, bro. I'm not ready for compliments.
it,
I'm a little vulnerable lately.
but I'm like I find these things so valuable. Like these are the things that I looked
Thank
into
you.
for. Like you have officially put me, I mean, just by having my friends on already, like you put me in a context with every other person that's like been on the show. And like that's valuable. Like I can now see those people and they can now see me. And then I can see who they're next to and they can see who I'm next to. And we can start to like fix this thing.
Yeah.
a really micro level. Like I really believe that because I feel like most of our mentors or like the people before us not doing this work like aren't interested in that. I don't know how to describe it because I also don't want to like invalidate like really beautiful art practices that I do look to also, but I think of like other places art fair just because it was an example and I'm like,
It's what
why
clicks. It's what clicks for your art practice, you know?
artists stop doing shit like that? Like when did we stop? Like when did the living room gallery die? Like
2020.
when did when did the garage gallery die? And like why the fuck do we not talk about how valuable that was? And it's confusing to me. Like I showed up grad school fucking like second day of teaching. I went down the list of all of my friends' artist run spaces. Victor did the newsstand project, a newsstand outside of like region projects. Like it
Hmm.
and Garen, I don't know if you know Garen, he like had a bedroom gallery, you know? I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
goes on in my mom's garage. Like what happened? What happened? It's like
Well, I mean, no, that is actually a very fair question, and I talk when you check out Kay's episode, I talk with her. She basically straight up says that she felt like there weren't as many spaces as there were before COVID. Like COVID destroyed a lot of things, you know, like the lockdowns just made it impossible to do crazy things. You couldn't have people at your house, but they're coming back, man. They really are. I mean,
I
in the
like I'm like where like that to me is critical discourse. I
yeah,
don't think oftentimes critical discourse happens in a museum or in
yeah,
a gallery unless you are shifting the way that space is used. And that's not to say the work that's in there isn't doing that. I'm talking literally about the space as somebody who
yeah,
makes spaces and is like invested in spaces, like this kind of a space, like that, like when you also look at the history of these spaces, they started in living rooms. Like I think of like,
yeah.
and I'm like, wait, 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 wait.
Well, you know, and Lou Gallery started as one. Night Gallery started as yeah, all these spaces. Like
Um,
I think
fucking
I think one of the things that also does happen is that like you can't to some degree you can't just keep doing it for free for the rest of your life. So you either become a night gallery or you become or you just stop, you know. Like it's a very difficult thing to do. But I would also say that like yes, it's cool, but we did start talking about how not every artist run collective. I would say,
part
I would
two.
say, I would say, be careful with collectives. You know, I, I, I think life is a lot easier when you have entire ownership of a project
Wait,
because when you're doing things by committee, you will get pushed out. You will end up in situations where there's too many white people and they don't hear the things. Like, I mean, I, I asked for more people that spoke Spanish at my collective, and it was a huge problem. And the collective
was Los Angeles.
was that, yeah. And I made the point that we're in Los Angeles, and I'm the only one. I'm the only one that spoke Spanish within Los Angeles of the collective, and and like and they like they couldn't understand, and the space has a Spanish name. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it, but you know which space it is.
yeah. And that's the thing too. Like I was gonna say, like I think the only because I remember that that's how we started this conversation, and I had a lot of thoughts like immediately because I think I have similar opinions about collective. I also think that like people who benefit from calling themselves collectives are also they're like white people, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't I think any other person who identifies they're like a group of people who work adjacent to each other, when they identify as a collective, that's like seen as violent. That's like seen as like, you know, like aggravated or something. And
yeah.
like the people who benefit from being a collective are people who operate with privilege. They're people who look like me. And I
Well,
think
they're also honestly they're people that have no like it's almost a dead end. I spent a year just kind of circling a drain and thinking that I was making progress, and I was just in one space in one building over and over and over again. And ever since, like I'm free now. I mean,
right,
I cannot tell you I actually like I almost felt like a responsibility to document the space that I was in and the people. I There's millions and millions of, if you want to know who I'm talking about, all you have to do is listen to an episode from like like almost a year ago, right? Or like anywhere before like what, March of this year. And like honestly, ever since I had like a backlog of episodes of all those people that I had interviewed, and the second those episodes ran out, listenership went up
Yep.
because I wasn't serving a small community. I was serving the art community at
Right.
now, like now. And dude, I mean, I just outgrew it. I definitely outgrew it. And it was, and that is like, it's a hard thing to realize. It's scary to realize that you're bigger than the thing that you used to look up to.
Right. Well, it's like, what's that Batman quote that's like, you like live long enough to see yourself become the villain or something? Like you die
Yeah,
or like live, and it feels. I just watched Batman like 2 weeks ago, so
that
that's
shit was so good. I watched it again, dude.
a bit.
It's the
But I
best 3 hour movie.
and I think like setting. Sometimes it feels like these collectives like are attempting to put themselves within like an art historical context that doesn't work anymore, and
Yeah,
they don't actually understand what goes into sustaining something. And not to say that I'm like omniscient in any of this. Again, I'm like young learning this right now actively, but I'm
yeah,
learning from those fucking mistakes because it's not intentional co-working. Like the what helped me through this project is like sitting down and really understanding what our roles were. And again, also that comes down to, and like that helps break up the hierarchy. Like we had undergrads acting in a play, and I think it was really important to like really allow them agency to act or something, and like
yeah,
not take advantage of them. Like if they didn't, like it would, we would sit down after rehearsal and be like, okay, what helps you feel comfortable doing this? And allow them to do those things. Like one of our actors was like, I appreciate when we do like a Rocky Horror route when we're heckled. So like
mm,
during the actual performance, if you could incite heckling, like that's gonna help me feel the agency to exist in this space as one of your actors. And like
wow,
that sort of like intentional co-working and collaboration, like I haven't seen that in spaces like the one you're referencing that like want to be a part of. They so desperately want to be a part of a like capital A art zeitgeist, which I like don't think is productive or fucking healthy. Like I'm a fan of like an empty white cube. Like I love to go to galleries, I love to go to art shows, but like when you're intentionally creating a space, like when you're like clawing at wanting to be, you're literally just like you're like fantasizing about being like the oppressor or something.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I definitely felt that way. I was doing a lot of physical labor for people, and yeah, and then there were people that were I was doing physical labor, installing and drilling into concrete walls, which is not fucking easy if you've ever done it. You have to like put your back into it. And for people that were paying less than me and were making bigger decisions, I didn't have a say and I was paying less than other people. How does that happen? And like, and people were talking bad about me. And all I was trying to do was promote the space. Like I was literally promoting the space almost every single week. And one of the hardest things after I left, was just because like was just having to continue to stay committed to putting out the episodes of people that I knew I was not cool with, and still promoting them, knowing that they were like they were talking shit about me and all of that. And it's like, hey, that's not what this podcast is about, like, But but I'd say, man, there's it's what I would say is that it is exactly the same hierarchies that exist in the art world. You nailed it right on the head. They're trying to be uh uh I don't think they see it as trying to be oppressors. They're trying to be assertive, which is essentially what I'm trying to do. I asserted my own relevance, essentially, and I encourage people to do that. It's not an easy thing to do. It's scary as fuck. And you start off and you don't know anybody, but then you get into a place where you're like, oh shit, I don't need these people that are not treating me right. I can walk away from this. And I mean, I didn't walk away. I got kicked out for complaining, but
Right.
but you no, it's, dude, you know what? It's just happens. But the point is that, like, I don't want to hurt the feelings. I still have friends in the Bendix. I still have people that I care a lot about and are very kind to me and are very nice. But the ultimate reality is that there's a couple commercial spaces there, but most of those spaces are vanity galleries, right?
Right.
If you pay rent for a space and you show your own work, like that, I'm not judging you for that, but that I don't think is going to help you become get into the next level of the like if you put I'm in a show in a space that I'm a member of and I pay rent, and then you put that as like on your CV and you hit up Night Gallery, I don't think they're going to take you seriously, so it becomes this thing where like there's no money, there's no ambition, there's only clout.
Right.
And then you start getting people, when you start speaking publicly about things, you start getting people calling you up and being like, oh, hey, man, what's up? What's up? And I'm like, you don't have anything to do with this. Why are you calling me? And it becomes a little problematic in the way. And when you call that shit out, you can't call white people out on doing racist shit because they fucking get so scared, you know? But that shit was not cool.
Forbid, like a
Yeah.
white is ignorant.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
But and then you talk to them, they just don't hear it. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, learn, like,
They don't want to.
solve themselves from their sins by like having like an artist run space or something.
I think one of the things that has been most freeing in this environment is just acknowledging, like, like I acknowledge it publicly, like, yo, sometimes I have racist thoughts and I don't want them there, but they've come from like programming. And like to be able to acknowledge that shit, I think is the main difference between somebody that's like incomplete enough. You're never gonna fix it if you don't acknowledge it. You're
Like,
never gonna be able to do shit. Like you have to, you weren't born with that, but somewhere you learned it, you know?
things fail too. Like these spaces fail because you're not willing to acknowledge what's wrong. Like you can do things wrong just because you're like, I can be wrong in this thing that I'm working through, and like that's so important. Like that's
Yeah.
also critical thinking, like 101. You learn that as a child. Like
Yeah.
you learn from falling, right? And like, damn, why do we forget that? Like, why are we so scared of doing that? It's wild. And it's like,
They wouldn't even talk to me, dude. They just kicked me straight out. There was no conversation.
that's
And I was told,
also that like that's explicitly racist.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
And they were telling me like, yo, but you're from Florida. And I was like, my parents are refugees, bro. Like, you know, anyway, I don't want to get too much into this. I just feel like comfortable talking to you about it because you knew me in that time. And
Echo Park, like
yeah, yeah, dude. Anyway, we should probably wrap up. You did make me really emotional earlier when you told me that, like when you were giving me compliments. I'm glad we stopped because I couldn't handle much more of that. But I want to thank you for that because I feel really seen, and I don't always. So I appreciate that. That was very kind of you. Is there anything that you want to talk about on the way out that maybe we didn't get to in relation to the main topic?
I would just like to say that it's an honor to see, and I feel really passionate and care about the things that I think we spoke about, and I'm honored and happy that I have the privilege to even be able to think about how we create spaces together, how we facilitate, and how we are able to show up for each other. And like, it's good to be allowed this space to say things. And I think that if this doesn't exist, then like a lot of other stuff doesn't. So I think it's important, you know, and I think we need to keep doing things like this.
Thank you, man.
Honestly.
Yeah. When I interviewed Kay, I was like very emphatic about wanting to do OPAF again. And by the end of the episode, there was no clear OPAF
Right.
coming. Like she basically left me hanging. And then when she posted recently that like you can like the early application, I was like, first.
Also important too, I guess, like another final remark is
Yeah.
I love not like separating things. Like I think of like all the like to like talk again about like an art historical context, like every social practice, everything like this that has become something more, or that might still be like this, like I like to see them as like similar, working in tandem with each other and informing each other. And I think that that's really important too, and like not separating. Like
Yeah.
it's like the problem with like theory, right? Or like school, like separating like feelings from thought. And I don't agree with that. And I think it's important here to also, like, when I think of this project and I think of the projects we talked about, I see them aligned with like the sort of best artist run initiatives we can think about that are like actually good. I
Thank you.
like they all exist.
That's overwhelming, but thank you.
I think that's powerful. And I think that
Yeah.
that's something that maybe I've had to tell myself when doing a project. Like I'm a part of this conversation. I'm a part of this lineage, and like we all are. And I think that that's like really important. And like that sounds really philosophical and like, "Ooh, I'm like 27, we're all friends, part of a community." But I'm like,
No, I mean it is.
fucking say it though. Otherwise, like we're not gonna burn things down.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna look, the thing that you learn as you get older is that you're always in this space. It's a very small space. As big as the world is, I've met people that know each other that I've interviewed from other places. You know, like I've interviewed Chelsea Flowers from what's it called, from Detroit, and like she knows two of my homies over here. You
Right.
know, and so like it is a very small world. The other thing that you're gonna have to slowly get used to is the fact that your friends in this network are going to have friends that you don't like,
Right.
and that is just a reality. And it is, and you can't, you have to understand that not everybody's taking on your fights.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, like, I just don't want to leave on a completely saccharine note. Like, the
That's
reality is is that everybody's trying to hustle, and they're like, as much as people want to pretend that art is a great happy community, there's only so many slots, and people are competing, you know.
yeah.
Like, even to get into like the art collective spaces that we were talking about earlier, there's people that really want that, you know, that really want that on their resume, because they don't know that, like, it's a starting point. So even those places, as much as I have my problems with it, and we've talked about them, like, they're necessary, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, unfortunately, some of them are only platforming a specific kind of artist.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like over the last few years, the discourse and the quality of shows in that space has just dropped. I've watched it happen, you know. So it's one of those things that, like, even things go sour, you know, like, because it was a great place at one point. So anyway, just to end on a bitter note, since we've been bitter the whole time.
Yeah.
Hey man, I just want you to know I'm bitter too. I'm definitely bitter.
If the ball keeps rolling on bitterness, I'm
Yeah,
in.
don't let them take that away from you. That means you're paying attention. And you're not asleep. Cool. Anything that we can promote for you? What you got going on? Your Instagram? Do you have a website?
No website currently, but you can find me at Uncut Thems on Instagram. Nothing, no creative projects to promote as of right now. Um, Looking for employment. So if you have any leads, hit me
Send them
up.
over to you. Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know too many people in San Diego, but we can always throw that out there for the audience to hear, and hire this man or
If
this person. Sorry, I'm fucked up.
anybody wants to talk about projects together, like that's, I would love to dream with someone and dream
Cool.
about.
And
So
then
that's
I definitely encourage you to apply, come up with a project and apply, because I don't know when the regular applications come in, but that's sometime next year. So check it out. Cool. And then we'll be back next week with another guest and another topic that may or may not be art related.
sick.
All right, let me stop the recording. I'm gonna try to not hang up on you like I usually do.
You do.